Welcome to Crash News. Today is May 13, 2025. And speaking of the future, getting here maybe faster than we thought. Did you catch wind of this sort of quiet shift happening in AI infrastructure?
Oh, yeah. What's the buzz?
Well, it seems like it's not just about who has the biggest, smartest model anymore. It's becoming more about smarter strategies and maybe some unexpected players calling the shots.
Interesting.
Yeah, and here at Crash News, we try to be your shortcut to understanding this stuff, the really important AI news. We take all the complex things and, break it down step by step. Plain English.
Starting simple, then building up.
Exactly. We'll start with the basics, layer in more detail, and always pause if there's a term that might be new. Explain it quickly.
Makes sense.
Cool.
Yeah.
So before we jump in, just a quick reminder. If you find this helpful, there are some totally free ways you can support Crash News. A quick rating, maybe a like, subscribe on whatever platform you're using to listen. That helps a lot.
Definitely does.
You can also hop into our Discord community. It's growing pretty fast. Lots of good chats there. And for anyone who wants to do a bit more, we do have a Patreon.
Great options. So what are we diving into today?
Okay, three main things. First, OpenAI's really ambitious Stargate data center plan. Sounds like it might be hitting some turbulence.
What's okay?
Then we'll look at Google. They're making a strategic move, funding AI startups with a new fund.
Ah, fostering the ecosystem.
Exactly. And finally, we'll see how different fields think high stakes, like healthcare and journalism, how they're actually dealing with bringing AI into their day-to-day.
Right, the practical side of things. Okay, let's start with OpenAI and Stargate. What's the story?
Okay, so the main headline is this huge initiative, Stargate, a $500 million data center project. It's reportedly, well, facing some difficulties.
Difficulties like?
Primarily, it seems to boil down to investor caution,
Yeah.
linked to the general economic volatility we're seeing. Okay, so before we go further, data center. For anyone maybe picturing, I don't know, a closet full of servers from a movie, what are we really talking about here?
Right, good point. Think bigger,
Yeah.
much bigger. Imagine like a massive warehouse just absolutely packed with rows and rows of incredibly powerful computers. These aren't your desktop PCs, they're specialized machines. And AI models need these for, well, two big things. The learning phase, which we call training, that takes immense power, and then just running the AI, answering queries, doing tasks.
Got it. The heavy lifting hardware.
Exactly. So Stargate is meant to be a particularly enormous and powerful version of this, specifically for OpenAI's future, potentially much larger AI models.
Okay. So the people with the money, the potential investors, are feeling a bit nervous about the economy right now. Makes sense that a $500 million project might seem riskier.
That seems to be the core issue, yeah. Hesitancy to commit that kind of capital in uncertain times.
But here's where it gets interesting, maybe a bit counterintuitive. While OpenAI might be facing delays, the situation in China looks, well, quite different.
Yeah, that's a fascinating contrast because reports suggest China actually has significant overcapacity in its AI data centers already.
Overcapacity, like empty space.
Pretty much. We're
Hmm.
hearing figures like maybe 80% of the resources across over 500 recently built data centers are just sitting idle.
Wow, 80%.
That's the report. And this is even after, market adjustments happened because of new, maybe more efficient models like DeepSeek's R1, which changed what kind of hardware people needed.
So even with all that unused capacity, they're still investing heavily.
It seems so. There's a really strong push to continue building out this infrastructure, likely to compete directly with U.S. initiatives like Stargate.
Okay, so let's piece this together. A major U.S. project, Stargate, might be slowing down because investors are cautious about the economy.
Right.
Meanwhile, China, despite already having tons of unused AI computing power, is doubling down on building more.
Exactly. It kind of paints a complex global picture, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
And it raises a big question, maybe for you listening. If a project like Stargate slows down, what does that mean for how fast AI develops overall?
And maybe just as important, who ends up controlling the fundamental infrastructure, these massive data centers that all this powerful AI relies on?
Yeah, definitely something to chew on. Okay, let's shift gears. Second topic. Google. They've launched something called the AI Futures Fund. What's that about?
Right, the AI Futures Fund. This is Google essentially setting up a program to invest in early-stage startups. The key thing is these startups have to be using AI tools and models from Google DeepMind to build their products.
So it's not just money then.
No, it's more of a package deal. Besides potential funding, these startups get early access to Google's newest AI models. They get credits to use Google Cloud.
Cloud credits are always useful for a startup.
Absolutely. Plus, they get support directly from Google's AI experts, researchers, engineers. And yeah, there's also the chance of Google taking an equity stake directly.
Sounds like a pretty sweet deal for a new company. Do we know who's involved already? Any early participants?
Yeah, they've mentioned a few. There's Vigil, they're working on AI for video creation. Synthesia is another one focused on synthetic media like AI avatars.
Right.
And Replit, which is a platform for collaborative coding. So you see, it's a pretty diverse mix of applications they're looking to support.
Right. So obviously it helps the startups. But what's Google's angle here? What's the bigger strategy?
Well, if you zoom out, it looks pretty strategic. By supporting and investing in companies that build on their tech, Google is essentially trying to make its AI models the go-to standard.
Like building an ecosystem around their tools.
Exactly that. Cultivate this environment where new businesses, new developers just naturally choose Google's AI platform to build on top of.
Makes sense. And speaking of developers, Google's also jumping into the AI coding assistant race, right?
That's the other big piece of news, yeah. The word is they're planning to unveil their own AI agent for software development, likely at their big I/O conference, May 20th.
Okay, so an AI tool to help write code, debug, that sort of thing.
Presumably, yes. Assisting developers through various parts of the software creation lifecycle. And this is significant because it puts them head-to-head with existing players.
Like who?
Well, you've got Anthropic's Claude Code. OpenAI has something reportedly called Windsurf. And then there's a whole bunch of smaller startups trying to crack this space, too.
So that area is definitely heating up.
For sure. It's seen as a major application area for AI.
And I heard something about AR glasses integration. That sounds pretty futuristic.
Yeah, there's some speculation floating around about that this new coding assistant might integrate with Google's Gemini AI models and maybe even their augmented reality hardware.
Wow. Imagine coding help projected right into your glasses.
Exactly. So taking these two things together, the startup fund and this new coding assistant, it leads to another question for you. How are these Google moves going to change the AI innovation landscape?
Right.
And maybe more personally, what kinds of new opportunities could this open up for people wanting to start businesses or just for individual developers?
Lots to think about there. Okay, let's move to our third area. How AI is actually being used, or maybe not used, in different industries. Let's start with healthcare. OpenAI introduced something called Healthbench.
Yes, Healthbench. This is a new benchmark OpenAI developed specifically to test how well AI models can handle real, often complex medical conversations.
Okay, so like a standardized test for medical AI chatbots.
Sort of, yeah. But what's really important is how it was developed. They got input from 262 doctors across 60 different countries.
Wow, that's a lot of expert input.
It really is. It means the benchmark is hopefully grounded in, actual real-world medical situations and the nuances involved, not just textbook cases.
So what does it actually measure? How does it test the AI?
The AIs are evaluated on how they respond in over 5,000 genuine health-related conversation scenarios. The physicians helped create a detailed scoring system, a rubric, looking at key things like, is the AI factually accurate? How good is the communication? Is it clear, empathetic?
Okay.
And crucially, does the AI know when it needs more information? Does it ask the right context-seeking questions? This was tested across all sorts of scenarios, from emergency referrals to broader global health issues.
Right, knowing what you don't know is pretty critical in medicine.
Yeah, absolutely vital.
So what did they find when they ran different AIs through this health bench? Any surprises?
Well, one interesting finding was that OpenAI's own O3 model apparently did better on this specific benchmark than other big names like Claude 3.7 or Gemini 2.5 Pro.
Okay, not entirely expected they'd highlight their own model doing well.
True, but perhaps more surprising and potentially more significant was the performance of their smaller models. Something called GPT 4.1 Nano showed really strong results. It actually outperformed some larger models, even their own GPT-4o on some aspects, while being way cheaper to run.
Cheaper how?
The report mentioned something like 25 times cheaper.
25 times? Whoa!
Yeah, so it suggests that maybe for specialized tasks like these medical conversations, you don't always need the absolute biggest, most expensive AI model to get top-tier performance.
That's actually a huge deal for potentially making healthcare AI more accessible, more affordable.
It could be, yeah. It opens up possibilities.
Okay, fascinating stuff in healthcare. Now let's switch gears completely. Journalism How are newsrooms dealing with AI? Are they embracing it, resisting it?
Well, the picture there seems much more
Yeah.
nuanced. Cautious is probably a good word. There was a survey recently talking to people at places like Reuters, The Washington Post, VentureBeat, 404 Media.
Like a reputable sources.
Right. And it shows newsrooms are being very selective about where they use AI. There seems to be general acceptance, even enthusiasm, for using AI tools for things like transcription, turning audio or video into text. That saves a lot of time.
Sure, I can see that.
Also for data analysis, like sifting through large data sets for investigative pieces. And for translation, making stories accessible in other languages.
So tools that help the journalists do their job more efficiently.
Exactly. These are seen as enhancing efficiency or reach, but they don't really touch the core process of creating the actual news content.
So that's where the line is drawn, actually writing the articles.
Precisely. There's a clear reluctance, even resistance, to using AI for that primary content creation task. The journalists surveyed really emphasized things like maintaining audience trust, upholding journalistic integrity.
Makes sense. You need to trust where your news comes from.
Absolutely. There's a big worry that AI-generated content just might not meet those standards or could be easily misused. For example, Reuters mentioned they use AI to help generate about 25% of their code now for internal software and tools.
Okay, so using it for technical tasks internally.
Right. But they remain very skeptical, very wary about having AI write the actual news stories that people read.
So it's more about AI as a supportive tool, augmenting the human journalist, not replacing them.
That seems to be the dominant approach right now, careful integration.
Okay. So when you look at these two fields, healthcare and journalism, with their different approaches.
Yeah, it really highlights some key things, doesn't it? These practical considerations that come up as AI gets woven more deeply into professional life. Like, how do you guarantee accuracy and safety in a field like medicine where mistakes can be critical?
Right.
And in a field like journalism, how do you protect fundamental values like trust and integrity when the technology could potentially undermine them? These are big, ongoing questions.
They really are. Important things to keep wrestling with.
Well, I think that brings us towards the end of our deep dive today.
Yeah, so just to recap quickly, we saw how even huge AI projects like Stargate can bump up against economic realities.
Right, the money side matters.
We saw how tech giants like Google are playing a strategic game, trying to shape the future by funding startups and building new developer tools.
Building that ecosystem.
And we saw how different industries, healthcare, journalism, are finding their own paths, cautiously integrating AI, balancing the potential benefits with their core values and concerns.
So hopefully, stepping through all that has given you a clearer picture of some key things happening right now in AI. Maybe a few aha moments without it being too overwhelming.
Yeah, and maybe leaves you with a final thought to ponder. As AI keeps getting more powerful, more integrated into everything, what role should critical thinking and just a really nuanced understanding of what AI can and can't do, what role should that play in how we develop it and adopt it everywhere? Good question to leave folks with. Thanks for tuning in to this deep dive into the world of AI.